Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June board meeting for Ignite CDA, and we'll start off with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on into the consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent calendar for June,
Second.
which is the meeting minutes, payables, and also the financials.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Yes.
Any comments, corrections, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Steve. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have a presentation for the Health Corridor Traffic Study from DOWL. Please come forward and kick it off. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Chair and members of the board. My name is Adam Miles. I work with Dowell Consulting Engineers, and we're here to present to you. Wrong presentation. We're presenting to you this presentation. There you go. Someone's controlling the mouse. There we go. So as I said, my name is Adam Miles, and on the phone should be Dave Simmons, our project manager on the project. And we're just going to give you an update of where we're at on the project and present to you some of the future alternatives we've come up with. A little bit of background, as you're well aware, the Health Corridor Master Plan was completed in September of 2019 and then adopted in November of 2019. And in that master plan, there was a series of mobility improvements, but the master plan also identified the need for further refinement and analysis of the transportation system as a whole, and that's the study that we're conducting right now. So with the Health Corridor as a urban renewal district established, the purpose of this project was to review those transportation needs and develop the future transportation needs to accommodate the development of the master plan as well as the background growth that we see in the area. And then we would also progress from this project an implementation plan that would align with the phases outlined in the master plan. So our project study area is a little bit broader than the urban renewal district boundaries, mainly because traffic doesn't necessarily stop at those boundaries borders. And so our study area contains I-90 at the Northwest Boulevard interchange to the 4th Street interchange, and then 95 from Niter all the way down to La Crosse, and Northwest Boulevard also from about Marie, Niter area all the way down to La Crosse as well, and we go as far west on Celtice Way as Atlas Road. So far, the task that we've completed is the traffic data suitability and calibration. As you might remember, from 2020, we had a pandemic that made getting accurate traffic counts during normal conditions quite difficult. So we used prior counts that were collected in 2018 and 2019 as part of other studies, and then we infused that with alternative data sources such as Bluetooth and cell phone data that was collected during those timeframes as well to help fill in the gaps that we were missing. And with that, we put together an existing conditions and short-term solutions memo that dealt with the existing situation on the ground today that we're experiencing, and we've progressed that into our future conditions and alternatives analysis, which you'll be seeing some of. But as I said, the short-term solutions that we identified based on traffic today is that the 95 signals need a retiming effort as well as the Northwest Boulevard signals. And then we also identified that Apple Way between about 95 and Government Way especially was above average on its collision rate compared to statewide averages for similar corridors. And so we identified that as a key area where access management would be helpful. And access management is the process by which you go through and consolidate driveways that can be consolidated. You reduce turning movements at key driveways so as to provide a more operationally smooth path for people who are traveling on Apple Way, but also a safer situation for those who are turning on and off of Apple Way. We also looked at the travel data in the area. As we said, we looked at cell phone and Bluetooth data, and that gave us a real clear picture about the origins and destinations that we're seeing in the corridor. And some of the key elements that I want to highlight with this figure, you'll see in the orange ovals, that's traffic that is coming to or from the health corridor and what roads they're traveling on. And we can see that approximately 40% of the traffic is coming from the west, either on I-90 or on Southeast Way, and another 30% is coming from the north, either on Ramsey or on 95. And so 70% of all traffic is coming from the north or west, and then the other gateways into the health corridor area, such as Government Way or even I-90 east of this area, are really in the single digits. And so we wanted to, when we get into troubleshooting and determining the best solutions going forward, we really want to focus on where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. Go back real quick. The second set of numbers that you see in the yellow zones, we also looked at what blocks in the health corridor are people going to and coming from. And as you would expect, the hospital in the AM represents about 30% of all people coming to and from the area. And then in the evening represents about 24%. The second biggest area inside of that boundary is about the Interlake facility, which is 13 and 12%. But the most dramatic shift that you'll see is actually over by the Ironwood Plaza, where the Albertsons and the Rite Aid are. That's about 8% of our traffic in the morning, but come evening it represents about 19%. And that's where we're seeing a lot of conflict on 95, is people coming to and from Ironwood Plaza are also competing for space on the road with people who are coming to and from the hospital and health-related land uses. So we looked at 3 future scenarios, the first being the no build. So this is our existing development trend and took into account the projects and developments that are currently on the books. We wanted to get an idea of if the master plan didn't happen and we just did everything that's on the books and the development that's planned for, what are we looking at? And so the projects that we included are the US 95 interchange, which necessitates a widening of US 95 from about Niter down to Ironwood to 7 lanes. The La Crosse connector is going under construction this year for the city of Coeur d'Alene. That includes a signal at Northwest Boulevard in La Crosse. The Atlas Mill development, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. That is also planned for and to be completed within the next 20 years. The Hutter Bypass to our west of our study area, and then an arterial connection further to the north. So with those projects included, we're still seeing failures. Traffic engineers rate transportation, your ability to get from one place to another on a scale of A to F. E and F are near or failing. That means you're waiting about a minute or more on average when you go up to those signals or those stop signs. And so we've got 9 failures projected, and again, that's with the projects on the books and with the development that we're already planning for. So the master plan did make efforts to alleviate some of those issues. And some of the projects that the master plan includes are an overpass shown at Howard with some additional signals. And we tried to, the master plan didn't explicitly say there shall be a signal here, there shall be a signal there. So we tried to include the most reasonable projects based on what we could decipher from the master plan's actual documentation. So that included some additional signals on Ironwood to allow people to turn in and out of the new developments the master plan proposes. As well as a signal at Northwest Boulevard in Emma, largely to serve people coming to Northwest Boulevard from the Interlake facility. And then it did explicitly call for a connection of Ironwood Drive across Government Way over to the third and fourth couplet on Annie. And then one of the things not explicitly called out in the master plan, but that we thought really deserved to be mentioned, is it does go through a process of access management. You see out there on Ironwood today, particularly between Lakewood and 95, there's a lot of existing driveways, there's a lot of existing side streets, and each one of those has their own set of turning movements. So the master plan goes through and significantly reduces the amount of accesses as these parcels redevelop. So with all of the master plan development, as well as some of the projects that are included in the master plan, we see a slight improvement. It went from 9 projected failures down to 6, and largely those are clustered around Northwest Boulevard and US 95. And a lot of that has to do with, again, the health corridors traffic directly competes on these major arterials like Northwest Boulevard and 95 with background traffic, commuters, tourists, things of that nature. So when we looked at our build alternative, like I said, we tried to focus on those connections to the north and to the west, and since those are the areas where people are most likely to head, and that's where we can get the most improvement out of. So we took the master plan's idea of an overpass at Howard. We actually ended up shifting it to Julia and creating a more direct north-south connection from the Riverstone development along Lakewood all the way up. And Julia dead ends today at a city facility to the north. So we included a crossover that brings it back over to Howard at a roundabout so that people can continue on that north-south direction all the way to Kathleen. We also showed some southern health corridor connections in the master plan. This was called out as a separate street. We kept that, but we actually ended up extending it to create some connectivity between those southern blocks. We show some medians on Northwest Boulevard and 95 in those southern blocks of the health corridor. Those serve multiple purposes. One, for the access management and safety improvements on Northwest Boulevard and 95 that we talked about, but also it helps with residential intrusion. There's a lot of crossover traffic of people going from Northwest Boulevard to 95 or vice versa, and having those medians limits the amount of cut-through traffic you'll end up seeing. Again, the driveway closures and access management on Ironwood are also recommended in our alternative as well. And then the part 3 is really the big improvement items that I want to draw your attention to. The first thing is the Northwest Boulevard interchange needs an upgrade at the ramps in order to handle the projected future traffic. In addition to that, we're proposing some frontage roads that would extend from the Northwest Boulevard interchange to the Julia overpass in our plan. And that allows a more direct route for traffic that does want to come to and from the health corridor, so that they don't have to make multiple turns at multiple signals to get into their desired destination. And that actually allows the signals to spend more time focusing on north-south on Northwest Boulevard or north-south on 95. And in the future, when we do those additional improvements, it's anticlimactic because there's no failures anymore. So we were able to clean up a lot of the failures, and the resulting system works. So just kind of a bullet version of that. Scenario 1 was the existing development trend. The master plan does layer in some additional development. It's not a gigantic shift from the existing development trend, but there is some additional development planned for in the master plan. And then, as you can see, as we go from scenario 1 to 2 to 3, we're really layering in some additional improvements that the existing project list does not include, and then also that the master plan does not include, as well as making some modifications to what the master plan elements did have, like the Howard overpass moving to Julia, and also adding the frontage roads. And we went from 9 failures down to 0. So then the next step obviously is going to be implementation and figuring out when in the process does each one of these improvements belong. And right now, the focus we've placed so far is on the initial phase improvements. Some of the bigger improvements, such as the frontage roads and the Julia overpass, and some of the interchange improvements are going to require federal and state collaboration, could take longer on the timeline. So the things we can do now, or the things that we can do in the interim while we're progressing on those larger scale improvements, are things like the access consolidation on Ironwood. That would be a great improvement. As development occurs, we would need a signal upgrade, likely at Lakewood and Ironwood, no matter what scenario we're looking at in the future. We can do some intersection capacity improvements at Northwest and Ironwood, as well as 95 and Ironwood. That's actually more of a reallocation of existing space on that one. And then we can install the raised medians to help with that residential neighborhood intrusion. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, obviously, this is a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
But what's the hypothetical cost of the overpass and the frontage roads? And what's the probability you think that we could get federal approval to do an overpass that close to the existing overpasses that are there?
So as far as the cost, we're currently in the process of developing the cost estimates for a lot of those projects. So I don't have the numbers right off the tip of my tongue,
And they're
but
20 years out or
we
so.
can get those to you through Tony for sure.
Okay.
And as far as the likelihood of getting that move forward, a lot of it, when it comes to federal and state requirements, comes to having a community consensus, going through a preferred alternatives process, and then lining up funding, which is also dependent upon a lot of government agencies pooling resources and showing collaboration for that. So the timeline, you know, if we had all the funding today, you know, design process can take about 1.5 to 2 years, and then the construction. So, you know, you're looking at least 4 years to get that stuff built minimum if you had all the money today. So really it's the funding process that can take a while, and making sure that we're listening to the community as well.
Thanks.
Dave, did you have anything to add? I know you're on the phone. Guess
Any
not.
other questions or comments?
I have a quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead,
So,
Brad.
what are some achievable short-term solutions to help out? You mentioned better light signalization. Probably most citizens that don't even have traffic engineering degrees around Kootenai County could agree on some better signalization timing on 95.
Right. Yeah, so the reason you saw two different slides, this one is the initial phase improvements that are related to what we're expecting in 20 years. That first slide was based on what we're seeing today, what we should do today. And so yes, when we looked at existing conditions on the ground today, we saw dramatic improvements could be made in signal timing just along 95 as a corridor, and also on Northwest Boulevard. And I know the city is currently going through a signal timing effort on Northwest Boulevard. So I don't know where they're at exactly in that process, but I know that that's occurring right now.
Okay.
So yeah, those are the short term, like if we spent some time, we could get them done pretty quickly. Access management is always a discussion point because no business really likes to limit their access. But it is a huge safety improvement, and I've been involved with several access management studies throughout the Northwest, and you can preserve access to businesses while also improving safety for the customers that visit those businesses.
Were you part of the team that presented this morning to Kootenai Health executives?
Yes.
Are there any concerns come out of that meeting, or questions, or?
There were questions. There was a question about the timeline, and you know, there was a procedural question to KMPO, but there were no concerns expressed at that meeting. I'm assuming we'll get any further comment through email feedback later.
I have a question. So I know you guys are working with KMPO, right? I don't
Yes.
know have you been working with ITDs?
Yes,
directly?
yeah, they're one of our stakeholders. So our stakeholders include the city, KMPO, Tony with Ignite, as well as ITD. We have several people from there, as well as the hospital.
So are any of these projects on their long-range transportation plans or STIPs?
So, like I had mentioned, the ones that we showed in the no build, go back a little bit. Oh, there we go. So the 95 widening is from Niter down to Ironwood is planned for. The interchange upgrade at 95 is in the long-range plan. And then they've also got some additional widening that they'll probably do along I-90 that's also included in the future plan. So those are the types of projects. So nothing after scenario 1 is currently in the plan.
That's what I was wondering. Okay, thank you.
You have any questions, Steve?
Has ITD or KMPO indicated that they could get funding for those immediate improvements?
Allie's here.
Sorry, I'm late. So I'm Allie Marino. I'm from KMPO.
Yes.
So I did want to note for that last question, as far as projects being on our planning documents, the Julia overpass is actually included in our MTP as well. But due to the analysis and the way we wanted to phase it, we left that out since it was specifically mentioned in the master plan as well. So that is in the MTP, and we have been looking at that for a few years now. And then as far as your second question is, it was if any of, sorry, could you repeat it?
Likelihood of funding.
Likelihood of funding, okay, for the overpass? Or
For any of those short-term projects?
okay, so the short-term projects or
Yeah,
the?
so the third scenario, the build scenario?
Oh,
Let's see.
so again, the Julia overpass is on our MTP. So as far as moving that forward to get federal funding, that would be one that could qualify because it is listed in our planning documents. The La Crosse extension also, and as you guys know, that one is going forward and should be completed by the end of the year. And then for the overpass or the interchange at Northwest Boulevard, as well as the frontage roads, those are not included in any of our planning documents at this time. I think that there could be discussion as far as ITD is looking at widening the interstate with some recent funding that they have received and are starting that process. And so that may be something that they look at once they get to that phase, but explicitly as a project, that one has not been identified.
Okay, because you guys understand where I'm going with that question. Okay, I just want to make sure that, it would be great to have those in those plans for future improvement and funding purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Widmeyer, I was finally able to navigate the mute button. And would it be possible to get a copy of the slides emailed to us? I guess that would be something that Tony could probably provide for us.
We'll make it happen.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank
Good
you.
job. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, that's right, there's a public meeting tomorrow, right?
Yep. Public meeting tomorrow.
Same meeting, right?
Same location.
Same presentation.
Tony, what time's the public meeting tomorrow?
It is at 5 p.m. and that is on Zoom. I need to come closer. That is, it'll be a Zoom webinar. So we'll be doing the presentation at 5 with Q&A to follow, and then we'll be repeating the same presentation at 6. That way, if people need to log in at 6 instead of 5, they're able to. And the registration link for that is on our website, kmpo.net, and it's under participate under news and notices is where you can find that.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks for coming down.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is a presentation from Bear Waterfront.
welcome.
Hi, Eric Hedlund with EH Design and Bear Waterfront. We're just here to give you an update on our progress of the property down on Bell Reef. The plan really hasn't changed a lot of the division of the property and what we were going to do with it. What we did do is we proceeded to design a building for the open area that's closest to BB Boulevard that we proposed the two different options back in January, February. So we've been working with the city and with the Trails Department about getting access across off of Tilford rather than coming off of BB to prevent less interchange and access onto BB that's already an issue. How do I get Tony? I'm not sure how to. Sorry, it's a big drawing. So what we did here is the angle parking that we proposed back in January is still all remaining the same. There's approximately 42 spaces that will be open to the public. You can see the axis in the brown right here. That's the axis that we're requesting that goes across the Trails Committee property. The yellow is what's going across the city property that we're working with Hillary and their team to get access across that into the parking lot that's right here that's only going to serve, I mean, it's open to the public for parking, but we're going to ask to require 6 parking spots for the building that we're proposing right here. The footprint of this building is 3,700 square feet. It's currently just proposed to have 3 tenants. We're not definite on what tenants they will be yet. What we would like this to be is a proposed depot building that looks like it was the original depot building that was on the trails down there. It's going to have a raised platform that looked like it was part of along the railroad tracks. We're hoping that there'll be some kind of cafe where it's a pedestrian building more than it's an automobile building. So we want it to be very pedestrian. We want to limit the amount of parking that goes down there, and we want it to be very accessible for the trail. So we're hoping for possibly a bike shop, cafe, and we're not sure on the other one, maybe a small little boutique store that's primarily for the trail. We did do the 3, I don't want to move it because it's going to take forever, but this area C, B, and A, those have remained the same, where A will remain with River Park Development. That will go with the residential down the end of Bell Reeve Lane. The middle will possibly go to Bell Reeve HOA, and this area in the blue would remain with River Park or Bear Waterfront. The relocation right here of the trail still comes down, so it goes across BB Boulevard directly straight across. There's no angle going across there anymore. It's straight across. And we do have support of Bell Reeve HOA to encroach onto their property to have for that to work. There was some concern about a few trees. There's about 7 trees that will have to be removed. Bear Waterfront's going to replace at least that many along the trail and above up here that takes care of any of those other trees for the trail to work properly. And I'll show you a few of the building. I don't know if you're as much worried about the space, but it's 3 just retail spaces, common space. There is an upper level that's about 2,000 square feet that we're not determined yet of what that's going to be yet. We'll work that out with Tony and the city. It'll depend on what parking's allowed. Let's see if I can. So there's the rendering of, headed east on the trail, and the trail's sitting right here. And this is the raised platform of what the old depot building would have looked like with the railroad being there. We're planning on a fully brick building, reclaimed timbers to make it look authentic and old. This is the side going west, coming kind of off of going, I guess, north on Beebe. And then this is the view coming towards the water down Beebe. So it's trying to make it just, put a little bit of a modern farmhouse twist to it with the old authentic depot look. So that's really what we've had to date. And so we've been working, we have support from Bellerive, we're working with Trails, and we're working with the city. The city we've gone through, we're already in preliminary design review with them. They're just needing us to get your approval, and then the 2 approvals from the Trails Committee and the city, obviously. And then we did receive Bellerive, so. That's all we have right now. We're looking forward to get going, get moving, and getting the west part into the PUD for the end of the residential as well. And if you guys have any questions, I can answer them.
Questions? Looks nice. It's a good look.
One comment I might add is, I don't know if Eric mentioned it, but they have met with the Centennial Trail Foundation, and the foundation is supportive of this concept and the access across their property. They just kind of have to work out a few of the details, that's my understanding.
I think it's just, I probably think primarily it's just the easement part of it. If it's purchased or an easement or a long-term easement or long-term lease, I'll leave that to attorneys to figure out, but.
You looking for a motion today?
No, I don't think any motion is needed other than, the board's approval of the concept in general. I mean, as they continue to work on things, but this is going to be refined in the DDA process where we kind of we'll insert this new kind of graphic and new design concept into the DDA process. But as long as the board has no concerns about moving forward, we'll continue to move forward with this redesigned concept.
I like the pedestrian focus a lot.
Thank you.
So just a question, so that's the trail coming by?
Correct.
And I use that a lot, so I'm kind of picturing, and if it's kind of geared for people on the trail, just kind of picturing, okay, people seeing that, slowing down, and then and I'm sure the trail people and you will figure out that there's enough space for people to, okay, see it, slow down, kind of get off their bike and walk without having, I mean, I see steps going up, but just sort of accommodate that kind of slowdown of traffic and congestion of some bikes and people.
Well, we're hoping it actually slows down people zooming across Beebe as well.
Yeah.
That's, I think the biggest concern is this will provide even something for people to look at and stop before they cross Beebe. Because that's one of the big, I live down there and Rob lives down there, and it's the people, cruising across Beebe with nothing to stop them right now. So we're hoping that even prevents some of that.
Levia?
And we'll provide parking and bike parking and all of that
Right,
as
okay.
required by the city.
I'm just curious, how tall is that?
I actually don't have that up, but it's probably only about 28 feet high. It's not a huge building. I mean, the footprint's only 3,700 square feet, so it's not, I mean, the footprint's about the size of some of the residences down there.
I was just curious.
Yeah. We're not trying to make it this big building. We want to make it really intimate and very pedestrian.
Good.
After a consultation with my colleague to my left, it probably would be good to have a motion. So,
That we approve the design and continue to go forward?
that works.
I'll make a motion then to approve the waterfront project design modifications.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just a quick question, maybe for Tony. So I did notice that John Stone did have some concerns. And did you guys address those concerns with John?
His concern that in his letter to, I guess, us, was mostly the trees was the big one, and any kind of too big of a building. Those are the two things he mentioned, and with the way the plan is, there's really only taking out a couple of major trees with the alignment. We feel either plan, you're gonna lose a couple trees. If we go with option A or B, we're gonna lose a couple. But, the developer's willing to add additional trees, and it doesn't affect the majority of the trees that are further west. And then as in traffic, that's why we brought it off of Tilford, and we're only supplying enough parking that's required by city at the site, because we're trying to make it a pedestrian building, not an automotive building. And with Bear Waterfront adding the 40-plus parking stalls, I think that's a pretty good trade-off to do that as part of this development.
Thank you.
Further comment, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, motion carries. Next on the agenda is the committee reports, the parking committee.
I don't have anything new to report, Mr. Chairman, today.
That was fast.
Trying to move it along.
Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First on the agenda is the Atlas Project, consideration of amendments to Area 10 and 12 DDAs. I shared these amendments with you, and basically these amendments to the two DDAs clarify what the developer owes Ignite CDA for design and infrastructure work performed and paid for by the agency. So we just need to clarify that with the developer. And as part of the negotiation, we also agreed to extending the closing date for both areas to December 3rd, 2021. So we gave them an extra, I think, 45 days to close. And those funds that they owe us will be due at closing on December 3rd. So we have the developer signed agreements in front of us, and so we just need board approval on that front.
I make a motion to have consideration of amendments to Area 10 and Area 12 DDAs.
Second. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries.
The second item under my report is also involves mainly the Atlas project, but it just conversation with the board about the executive director's A&E and DDA document signing authority. So just for some backgrounds, the A&E is the agreement to negotiate exclusively, and that's the first document or the first document we work with on developers, and then the disposition and development agreement is the DDA, which is basically the contract with the developers. So there's just for background for the viewers, these documents are used to govern the process for divesting of agency-owned properties to developers for development and redevelopment purposes. The A&Es and DDAs are then brought forward for board approval when initiated. So the board, has the initial approval for these documents. However, as the agency has experienced, working with developers is a fluid process, and it's sometimes difficult to time approvals with board meeting schedules, as well as address needed changes to the A&Es and DDAs as they come up. The board previously gave the executive director authority to enter into A&E amendments to extend internal deadlines within A&Es, which has enabled projects to keep moving. Given the need to keep project momentum going on the Atlas project, it is proposed that the executive director be given the following authority by the board regarding changes to board-approved A&Es and DDAs. So the first would be authority to enter into A&Es upon selection by the board of a developer project based on the RFP process. So once you pick the developer, we would just go ahead and start working on the A&E working with Danielle. Then the second would be authority to extend A&E and DDA timelines within reason. And then the final would be authority to agree to A&E DDA modifications that do not impact the overall intent of the board-approved documents. So basically, the board's given me latitude, basically Danielle and I, latitude to kind of work within the framework of your approval of developers' concept and to try to get the processes to the end zone.
We would bring the DDA. The intent would be that once you approve the developer, we would negotiate, and then Tony would just sign the A&E, which is just that, the initial due diligence period type, where they put the deposit down and do their due diligence before we actually enter into the DDA. The DDA we would bring to the board for initial approval, because that is the contract whereby you tell them or agree to how the project is going to be developed and then sold ultimately to the developer. So it would just be modifications to the DDA. Within the scope of your intent for the project.
Okay.
So case in point, right now, we're working on the A&Es for Area 5B and 8 that the board recently awarded to the Butler Development Group. So if you granted this authority to the executive director, we would just go ahead and get those A&Es structured and agreed to and signed and get the process moving to get to the formation of a DDA, which, as Danielle said, we would bring back to the board for approval.
Do you want 3 separate motions or everything done in one?
I make a motion to have the executive director to the A&E DDA document signing authority.
I'll second that.
Any concerns or questions?
Mr. Chairman, Steve Woodmeyer here. A question that I had was, there was one part of it that talked about extending timelines, and it said within reason. Is there, and that number or that statement is a little vague. Can we have a little bit more definition of that time frame? I'm good with extending agreements, but that just seems to be really open-ended when we just say within reason.
Commissioner Widmeyer, we could definitely put some scope on that, our ability to extend. I mean, I would say, you know, we do everything we can not to extend the deadlines of the developers, but sometimes, you know, things come up and change. I would maybe, if you wanted to put a time restriction on it, I would say 60 days, 90 days, maybe.
Yeah, I'm good with just either one of those. I just feel a little bit uncomfortable just saying within reason. I'm good with saying 90 days. I'm fine with that, but I would just feel a little bit more comfortable if it's just we put some time on that.
Yeah, I had the same thought, so.
I'm in agreement too, yeah.
Do you want to amend your motion, Olivia, to add 90 days as an outside date before we would bring it back to the board for reconsideration?
Sounds like a good amendment.
That actually probably is good for us also, because it gives us some leverage with the developers. Like, say, this is the extent of the extension that we can give you without having to take this back to the board. And, you know, we have used you all as a way to push developers along when we need to.
Okay, the motion's been amended. A second, okay with that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up on the agenda is the Atlas Project update with Mr. Phil Boyd.
Mr. Phil Boyd. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Hoskin and board
It's been
members.
2 months.
That's right, it has been a while.
We've missed you.
Well, this will be short and brief, at least my part. Del Hatch is also here to give you an update on the monuments. I'm going to quickly go through the 3 phases of the project and give you a little update on it. Phase 0, the waterfront park project, not much going on. The weedy grass, which I've mentioned to the board before, has been killed, and they've rehydraseeded everything. So if you go out there and look at it and say, gosh, this looks unsightly, why is that? Or it should look better now, at least there's hydroseed on it. So that's been completed, and the punch list items are also being completed. The punch list is pretty small, but Le Riviere is working through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the next 2 phases, phase 1 and 2. So I just put this up for the board, refreshing your memory. Phase 1 is this area over here. Phase 2 is broken into 2 parts, 2A down here, and 2B, which is kind of the rest of everything. On phase 1, this area here, the sidewalk and the curb is being placed. Interestingly, and some of you may have heard this, there's a cement shortage. So Le Riviere is having a little bit of a challenge getting some concrete because the cement isn't available. But they're doing the best that they can. They're still on target for a July 7th paving. I do want to bring it to the board's attention that when we pave, and I think I mentioned this before, just these streets down here may be paved. We're not certain that these streets up here will get paved because, as Tony mentioned, we're still working through with the Butlers on reconfiguration of Area 8, where they wanted to put an alley in and townhomes on the north and single-family homes on the south. So that might disrupt the schedule up here a little bit. The thinking was it's a more desirable configuration, and so it was worth the wait, so to speak. Also, the street landscape and irrigation pricing negotiations had started with La Riviere. I just threw this picture down here to refresh the board's memory. We had gone through a couple of different scenarios. The really kind of less water intensive but more expensive option, or more turf and just bushes at the intersections here. That's the option the board decided to move forward with. It's a little heavier on the water usage, but it was more cost effective from an initial cost standpoint. We're starting on the negotiations with La Riviere on that, and right out of the chute was the pricing of the PVC products, because all of that has shot up. And we're trying to figure out how to mitigate that impact, which involves a little bit of redesign. Because we want to try to keep it within the budget was originally established for the project. So they've priced it. We're doing a little bit of redesign on it. And then also when we secure the plantings, if we try to get all the plantings now, they're more expensive. If we might buy them in the fall, or we might suggest to you that you buy them in the fall. We may also come back and suggest to you that you buy for both phase 1 and phase 2, because we could get bigger pricing. We might have to build ourselves a nursery out there to house all the trees. But it's just, if we can get it more cost effectively buying in bulk, that may be better overall for the project. So those are some of the gyrations we're going through in the current post-COVID climate. Everything gets blamed on COVID, so that's where phase 1 is at. Any questions on that? Okay. Phase 2, let me skip back here. Phase 2, the area down in here, we've submitted those plans to the city, the infrastructure improvement plans, to the city for that, and we're also moving on negotiations starting with La Riviere for board consideration again at the July meeting. So that's also advancing forward and trying to deal with the impacts of material pricing there.
Let's see, one question back on phase 1, that map, or 1, and kind of where that little red place, is that where, see, kind of a structure being framed now, or?
Nope, that's the houses that are over in here.
Okay.
So yeah, if you've been out there walking on the trail and you look up here and see that, I think this house is being, this house is being framed. There's a couple up in here that are being framed. And I think there's a total of 6 under construction in that area.
Wow.
And then you've seen the activity over here on Active West. They've got the alley paved out and have the infrastructure in over there. And I anticipate we'll see some more going on in this area. Kind of as a side note, we did receive the design, preliminary design package from the Chase for these 2 parcels. So we'll start working on the process with the city to review the architectural components of that, and the overall layout, hoping it's consistent with the development standards.
Phil, what's the density on those 2 for the Chase?
So this one has, you mean on an acreage basis?
Well,
There's 84 multifamily units here and
4
66.
up on top, how
Yep.
many on the side?
And then 66 on the side here. And then this little red piece right here is the commercial requirement. Board might remember that was required as part of the PUD, that they have a commercial component there. Okay. So the next item is an action item. I'm actually going to leave this screen up because it takes a little bit of a story. It involves a sewer lift station, and I didn't think it would be appropriate to make a picture of that because it's not very interesting. But this will help me explain the story to you. So originally, this entire property was intended to flow to the west, to a lift station over on Grand Mill Drive. And the wastewater flows over there, it gets pumped up, flows down Southeast Way and makes its way over to the wastewater treatment plant over by NIC. The city has a surcharge on every parcel that flows into the Grand Mill lift station. And when you have 470 connections here at, I think it's $750 a connection, that starts to translate into a pretty substantial amount of money, which, being cheap, I was trying to figure out how do we get out of paying the city that money. They have another lift station in the other direction that doesn't have a surcharge on it. So as we were doing, and this goes back to like 2017, 2018, we were strategizing on how to get a big portion of this wastewater to flow to the east instead of to flow to the west. And we did this in collaboration with the city, and they understood. It made sense. Why pay an extra $750 for every ER when you could take that money and put it in your pocket, which is the public's pocket? So that was the strategy we worked on. And as we worked through that, we figured out how to take about 270 of the 470 potential ERs and have them flow to the east. When we did that analysis, though, into that lift station, what it turns out is the wet well is too small to accommodate the standby flow. So envision the power goes out, wastewater continues to flow, and if you don't have a big enough wet well, the wet well overflows, which is not an appropriate thing. So there's two different ways to solve that problem. One, build a bigger lift station, which is cost prohibitive, or put in standby power. So again, we worked through this with the city, developed a standby power. They use natural gas standby power generators, and so they always have a constant supply of fuel, and did the design on it, got pricing on it, have worked through with Larry Parsons and his group, the wastewater folks, and Mike Anderson, which have been super great to work with. And ultimately, we came up with the proposal that you see in front of you now, which is to buy the generator. And they kind of like this particular generator because they have other ones in their system. So they have one generator type. Buy the generator, hire the electrician to install it, and then get a Vista to run a gas line to it. Like everything else, everything's moving fast, and pricing is being held for 10 days or 20 days or 30 days. The current pricing we have on the generator, I think, was held for 10 days, but we've got them to hold it longer. And that's the action item in front of the board today, is to buy the generator. As we move forward, we'll get firm pricing from the electrician to install the generator and from Avista to bring a gas line to it. Normally, I would bring the entire package to you, all ready to go, but because we want to save as much money as we can, we want to miss the price increase that's forthcoming here. So hopefully that all makes sense, but I'm glad to answer any questions for the board.
So the total cost is less than $50,000?
Yeah, it's somewhere right around 50,000. We think it's probably going to be in the $45,000 range when we're all done with it. The break-even point is about 70 ERs. So you know, if you put that 50,000, so equates to 70 ERs, that means those 200 ERs times $750 a piece is all money back into, or not out of Ignite's pocket, is a way to look at it.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So, there's 400 and something ERs in here?
470 to 500, depending on how
Okay.
things shake out.
Okay, 500. And this generator solves half of that?
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as paying these ERs, isn't that something the builder would just have to pay when he pulls a permit rather than us?
For the surcharge fee?
Yeah.
Yes, they would, but of course, they're going to build it into their purchase price, right? The residual land value? Could you go in and figure out what can I sell the house for, subtract all my fees, and now those whole portions of those lots don't have those fees associated with it.
Yeah.
So and maybe that requires some advanced thinking on the buyer's part, but you would anticipate the residual land value. If you were dealing with one or two lots, I think I know where you're headed, Commissioner Jordan. You might go, no one's going to worry about $750. But if you have 200 lots, and 50% of the people worry about $750 on their land purchase price, then it has some impact.
Yeah, I'm not honestly sure if that would result in a reduced price to us or not. I mean, the Hayden Lake store is absolutely sky high, and lots are going for a premium out there. I don't know. I don't want to belabor this, but I don't think that would necessarily lower our return. I think it's just another cost they got at building permit time, and it gets built into the cost of the house.
And you may be absolutely right. In 2017, 2018, when the market wasn't smoking hot, as it is now, we're looking for every penny we can save. Now, maybe we're willing to, well, I wouldn't be willing to step over the pennies, but you just never know. And there is no increased cost other than this lift station. So the break-even point is 70 ERs on it.
Phil, is it possible to send everything east?
No, we tried that. But it just this is so much, there's a hump kind of in this area that we have to get over, and the sewer gets super deep, and so then, and this gets, I could rattle on and on about it, but then you start, the deeper the sewer gets, the more expensive it gets to build.
Sure.
And so you start working in the other direction on it. So our group in the office, figured out where that break point was, and also working with the city on how deep they want their sewers. Because once you get above a certain depth, it becomes a real challenge to maintain 100 years from now when you're working on them, or 75 years.
So where's the lift station that needs the generator? Is that even on? That's not even
No,
on
I'm
our
sorry,
property.
that's an excellent question. It's actually over right by where they were just showing you the pictures about Bella Reeve. It's literally right across the trail from that building.
Then my next question is, why should we absorb the whole cost of the generator? And I'm thinking here like a private developer, because I've gone around the mill on a generator before in a subdivision, but why should we absorb the whole cost of the generator when it's benefiting a lot of other properties?
Because the city, like a lot of cities, you're the triggering event. And the city actually has, and I think this might have gotten through to you guys in some text I wrote Tony, one of the other things that had to happen at this lift station was replacement of the pumps. So the pumps, both the pumps had to be replaced in the lift station because they just needed more capacity in them. And so as we were working through that, where we started was Ignite, need to replace the pumps and build us a new generator, or add that in there. As we work through that process, it's like, well, wait a second, the pumps have been there, they're depreciated, shouldn't the city pay for those? So the city actually sprung to put the new pumps in there after we negotiated that through with them. And Ignite's lift was the generator. So that was kind of the other compromise position we had with them.
Normally when a developer has to improve a pump station, then the oversizing or additional capacity, they get a reimbursement on it. And I guess, it's one public pocket, whether it's urban renewal money or it's the wastewater money, it's the public money. But I'm just looking at how all these expenses we've got, and we've got, we don't have, it's really easy to eat that contingency up, so I'm just bringing this up as far as saving the money in our pocket, because we're gonna have more expenses and things we're gonna wanna do in this subdivision, so the more we have to buy generators and do everything else comes out of our pocket, there's less room we're gonna have to have money to do all the things we need to do in here. And so,
Hopefully we have enough money to pay the city back, that's 7 million.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
hope.
So how many,
guess if we don't,
how
we
many
just,
properties now are gonna go east instead of west?
270.
So now this negatively affects all this money we're spending with Lance Douglas, because we're building that plumbing to the west, now that we don't have to have that, so that price just went way up by 200.
Might not be-
That, all that 200 was gonna go west through that new plumbing that
There's still gonna be 200 that flows
half as much.
west,
We paid
right?
a big chunk of that going through Lance Douglas's property.
Yeah, but that was because of a separate issue unrelated to, that might require some, that's a more delicate topic on why that transpired that way. Because,
But it's like what Brad's saying, that he's got his hand out, now that this got his hand out, and when does it stop?
When we're done.
well, part of me looks at this, and
Well,
I
it's
think.
great, but the city doesn't get paid back then when it's over.
Well, part of me looks at this and I think, this is a public park we're building for the citizens of the city. And we're on a pretty tight budget with everything we're trying to do here, so why can't wastewater they're an enterprise account and have plenty of funding, why can't they just amortize in the generator? There should have a generator at that lift station anyway. I don't know why they don't have a generator there yet.
Because currently the wet well has sufficient standby capacity to meet their policy based on the number of ERs that are there. So the wet well is sufficiently sized that it doesn't trigger a generator.
The wet well
I
won't
guess that's,
accommodate,
I guess that's a gamble, depending how long the power's out.
the wet well won't accommodate 470 though, will it?
It won't accommodate 270.
270.
The 270, correct. Yeah. And from an economic analysis standpoint, I don't want to be trite, but this is an easy decision to make, because the amount of money that you spend on this, avoiding the cost of going to the west, both, when we pitched it to the city was like, absolutely, that makes sense to avoid that cost. There's some other piping details that I would need another drawing to show you that created a more efficient pipe network as well, to collect the wastewater and moving it to the east instead of having to pipe it all to the west. And maybe I should have brought a more detailed economic analysis, because I understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Jordan.
Yeah, I don't want to be a pain in the rear and hold this up. I'm fine with what everybody wants to do. I'm just, like I said, I've been around the track on lift stations and oversizing and generators and all this in the past. And so I guess I'm looking at it from a developer's standpoint, and I'm just, we got so many things, there's always something coming up that's eating at part of our contingency, or we got to appropriate some more money for something, and I'm just kind of thinking, where does it stop before we run out of money with all the things we're trying to do to make this a nice park for all the citizens? And
Well, and remember, there's two separate items there. The park was funded through the Lake District, not associated with the revenue generated off of the development. So the $10 or $12 million that are estimated to come off as, we'll call it profit for this illustration, that's the money that's left over for you guys to reimburse the city or choose what you choose to do
Right.
with it. But the net revenue off of this project, again, would probably absorb that when you're in the $10 million range.
yeah. Yeah, but anyway, and I would say, I don't think we'll see any difference in value on the lots that have to pay the $750 surcharge. I think that's pretty small potatoes with everything that's going into a lot and building a house right now. That's a separate issue, but I think we should be fine on that.
Who is it that's asking us to buy this generator?
The city,
The city?
yeah. Yeah, because if you're you either make the wet well bigger or provide the standby power.
I thought it was a good question.
Phil, what's the status of the sewer line across Lance's property? Is that still on track to be completed in time to give the building permits this summer?
Should I, maybe Tony has an update on that.
You can punt that one over here,
Okay.
Mr. Boyd. So as of now, the sewer has been installed to the western edge of Mr. Douglas's property. The next step is to hook it into the sewer system that exists in the Mill River project. And there's negotiations going on now with the property owners about how best to do that. A straight line connection would involve kind of demoing an existing wall that's been constructed by the developers, the development over there, ripping out some trees and maybe doing some damage to some lawns and such. So they're kind of working at a workaround to kind of sneak it up around to the north and bring it in underground below the wall to kind of help that out. So there might be a little bit of a time delay on that. We're not sure. We're in conversations with the city and the contractor about that. But that's where it's at right now. I've been told today the line has been pressure tested all the way from the west end of Mr. Douglas's property all the way back to our project, and everything's fine. They're just waiting for that final connection to the Mill River sewer.
So it's connected to our
Yes.
property?
Yes. It's just not hooked up on the other end, so
Just doesn't flow yet.
getting close, getting close.
So it's built all the way from our property across his property, just waiting to be hooked up on the west side of his property?
Yes.
So I feel like, I'm just gonna throw it out there. I feel like we should be good partners in this, and in the grand scheme of things, 45,000 really isn't a lot compared to everything that we've already put into it. But I understand Commissioner Jordan's point too. So, I don't know, I could go either way, but I just wanted to throw that out there. That, I think that we have already invested a lot, and, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, we would be looking for a motion if the board would still want to move forward with this acquisition or not.
So Phil, I guess just a question, and I'm sure you're probably not going to be able to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It seems like every month there's another, oh, but we got to do this now type of thing. And I kind of hear this from some of the frustration that the board's having a little bit is, it seems like every month there's another added expense that seems to come up. And I understand that we don't know exactly what everything's going to cost out there. I mean, it's a very large project. It's going to have a lot of different pieces to it. And there's going to be things that come up that we can't anticipate. Is there a way to start to refine this a little bit? I mean, we're getting a ways along in some of these developments now. We're starting to see what some of the costs are going to be, and I know there's additional costs on just about every material there is. I just feel frustration from the board that there's just this add-on, and I guess I'm just trying to see if we can quantify that a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think the thing that would be helpful is, what does the board consider an add-on? Does the board consider, when we go to phase 2 infrastructure and we bring in pricing for that, and you're going to develop 40 lots off the phase 2 infrastructure, do you look at that and kind of go, I have anxiety because we're going to go spend money on it? Or is it kind of these little details that, like this one, that might be considered a frustrating add-on that you weren't aware of? That would...
Yeah, I think we all understand that there's going to be costs to develop. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think there's a pretty general understanding of what the typical cost to develop a lot is, or to develop parcels out there, develop the blocks. But it's these kind of things, all of a sudden now we find we have to have a generator because the lift station's not big enough or whatever. I mean, there's just things like this, it seems like they're one-offs that wouldn't typically be in the normal development scheme, but yet they are still a cost.
Sure, and maybe the way to do it is back in 2018 when I'm thinking about this, and the economic analysis is, in my mind, a no-brainer. And it makes efficient sense, and, it's just kind of an easy way to get to it. I should bring it forward to the board at that point and say, hey, this is a cost, this is one way to do it. You're going to avoid a bunch of expenditure over here. And Commissioner Jordan's point about whether it's at the permit or is that the infrastructure part, there's actually two parts of it. The easy one to think about is the buy-in on the other side at the lift station, but there's also a pipe network cost, which I didn't have at my fingertips. We could have brought that earlier in the process and said, have option A, it's $200,000, or option B, it's $45,000. Which would you choose?
Right.
My guess is the board's going to choose the $45,000 option. Since I assume that, I just forged ahead with it, and I bring it forward to you guys at this point because it was plain to me at the time that would be, and there's 100 decisions like that occur, that by the time it gets to here, it's been boiled down
Right.
economically in our shop, getting it to figure out, but we could bring those forward sooner.
Phil, another thing that might be advantageous, it's been a while since we've really had an economic understanding of where we're at and what the next costs are going to be. And sometimes it's always good just to refresh our memory on that. I mean, I know in finance, we probably look at this a little bit more than the rest of the board does, but sometimes I think we do get a little bit caught up in the immediate costs of this project.
Yeah.
And not see the big picture. And I think we're starting to get enough data now, particularly from the sales we've already either completed or in the process of completing. So we're starting to see some revenue sources coming in. We should look and see how those compare to what the projections were. And we should also probably look and see how our costs are looking compared to the projections. So maybe it's just a time to reanalyze where we're at on at this point in time versus where we were at when we started the project or had the last update.
And as you know, we made that a pretty detailed presentation to the Finance Committee, and maybe what we do is we take that presentation, and it had a massive amount of data in it that
Right.
you guys like kind of picking through and boil it down more generally as you're describing and bring that forward.
Yeah, and I think that's real helpful, because I think sometimes we look at a $50,000 expenditure and go, oh my God, it's another $50,000 expenditure, when in reality, you're right, it's a $10 million net project or something of that nature, and we don't realize the value that we're dealing with here. And, you know, sometimes there are necessary costs, but we should really understand exactly where they stand in the big
Sure.
picture.
Yeah, no,
Like that
that's,
suggestion.
yeah, that's yeah, and we have that data.
Oh, I
because
know
we
that.
did-
I know we do, because we've already walked through it.
Yeah, and we
But I
presented
just
it.
think it'd be good for the entire board to see it, so that everybody has a better understanding of where we're at. And I think, you know, it's a progress report. I think it's good to look at where we're at based upon some certainties now. We know what some costs are, we know what some revenue sources are, so let's kind of update everything.
And we can also talk about some of these potential cost-saving opportunities or not, like the trees.
Sure.
You know, if I come to you in a month or two and say, hey, let's go buy 600 trees, you all might say, I don't want to buy 600 trees, let's buy 200 trees. Well, the market on trees, you're going to, you know, spend triple if we have to buy them again, so maybe we should buy them now and nursery them in on site, because we have the real estate to do that. So there's a lot of that is, goes on. Tony's involved with those discussions that we have, but I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Arman,
And to
we'll bring
that point, I
forward.
think that what Mick was saying, you know, to have an overall
Mm-hmm.
picture, you know, just like during your project update, but also to Commissioner Jordan's point too, I think more of the frustration may be from who pays for what. You know, does a developer pay for this? Does the city pay for this? Or
It's
is
the
it-
homeowner, I mean, why isn't the
or-
homeowner paying the $700?
And so
for
we
it?
just don't want to look like that piggy
What I'd
bank,
have them do
so
if I
to
was the
speak.
developer.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get
They
it.
do pay it. They do pay it, but again, it's a fee that would typically, and I know Commissioner Jordan has his experience, my experience representing cities on the other end of it, working against developers like Commissioner Jordan in a diplomatic way, you know. It's completely different. In the city's example, even the example of the latecomers agreement, the city doesn't do latecomers agreement.
But we have
So-
a fiduciary responsibility just like the city does too. And so that's why I think
Yeah.
to Commissioner Jordan's point.
So you're saying that each homeowner that buys a lot there, they're gonna pay it also?
No, they pay their permit costs. So when you go in and get your building permit, there's the building permit costs, and then there's the surcharges that go on with it. And the fee associated with going to the west is one of those surcharge fees that the city charges at the time of permit. And so they pay it.
I don't know if the homeowner himself or herself pays it, but, I mean, most of these lots here, I think, are gonna be sold finished with a house by the builder developer. So, then you just get into this whole big discussion where the cities say, well, and you have citizens concerned about growth, and they're saying, well, the city needs to charge bigger impact fees, and we need this, we need that, you know, need to raise sewer fees, so, you know, and then you get into the discussion about, well, who's gonna pay that? Is the developer gonna pay that? Is he gonna pass it on the price? Well, he's gonna pass it on the price, and he's gonna pass on everything in the price that the market will let him pass on. He's
Then more.
And then
in
some.
the business to make
So then
he's
we're
in
gonna
the
pay it
business to make a
upfront,
profit.
And then the builder's gonna
That's-
charge the homeowner that
It's-
again? when he
It's
does
just
the
like
permit?
it's just like the impact fee, it's like the Parkland fee, all the different fees all go into the process and the building permit, you know, sewer capitalization fees, water cap fees.
I understand all that. Why are we paying it up front?
You're not.
Well,
Well, you
I
just
just-
said we're buying a
well-
generator to get rid of the $200, $700 fees.
I think he was saying we're gonna come out ahead because they'll pay more for the lots if they don't have to pay that $750 fee. I'm just saying the market like it is and everything, I don't think we're gonna notice the $750 fee. I think they're gonna pay just as much for the
And you may be
lots.
exactly right. In 2018, 2017, when we were doing this analysis, the market wasn't in this condition. The other option for the board, you don't have to make a decision on this. You can say, go back and have everything flow to the west, and we can easily make it flow to the west and avoid this $53,000 cost. I guess we would go back and maybe come back and show the board, here's the incremental cost to make it now flow to the west, instead of spending,
Incremental, but it was always gonna flow to the west. So why is there incremental now?
so when
But
it
it was
was
supposed
always
to
gonna
happen
flow to the
anyway.
west, yeah, So this gets a little bit complicated to explain, but think of the entire project as a basin. When the city does a master plan, they say this basin, this piece of property is all going to flow to the west. How it actually gets there, the pipe network where it flows through, that's not figured out. That's what happens during the design level. So when we go in and start designing the sewer network, you figure out here's how all the pipes are going to get connected for it to flow to the west. I recall that it's a higher pipe network cost to get all of this to flow to the west. It's cheaper to split it up, some flowing to the west, some flowing to the east, even after you buy the generator, or the generator at Riverside Lift Station, because you don't have to put as many pipes in. It's more efficient to split the basin up.
So could we have it split up, but just put that on the developer?
You are the developer.
Well, the actual developer, the builders.
I wanted to chime in and say that I agree with Mick, and he has a good point, and I just wanted to tell you that I understand, there's a lot of moving parts, and I mean, you're probably trying to hang on to this thing and keep track of this. There's so many moving parts, and make sure you're on top of this for us. And I understand this is a dynamic process where you're running into things that couldn't be foreseen, and things are changing. And we're lucky as can be right now that we're in probably the hottest market I've seen in my lifetime here in Coeur d'Alene. I mean, you know, we were wondering how to make this thing work, and we've still got some ways to go here, but I mean, we couldn't ask for a better market, you know, since we bought the property. And my only point with this thing, it's real easy to sit on a public agency and say, oh, well, it's not my money. Yeah, we'll just do the lift station. I don't care. I'm just trying to be an advocate for Ignite here. And I'm saying, well, if we're buying a generator for this lift station that serves all this other area, why are we getting stuck with a whole tab for this lift station? And then you're saying, well, you negotiated it because it needs new pumps. And so they said, well, they'd do the pumps if we bought the generator. And you know, I'm just,
You know,
I'm an advocate for Ignite because Ignite's the developer, and I'm just saying, everyone's always coming at Ignite just to pay all this, and I'm just looking at the principle of it, and
but Brad, we are the developer. I guess that's
why I say,
I guess that sometimes it's hard to wrap your mind around the fact that Ignite really is the developer of this property. And we're reselling the lots. So, I mean, if we really have heartburn about $50,000, let's, put some kind of a stipulation that we have to get it out of the sale of the lots or the sale of the blocks when we sell them. I mean, when you look at the number of lots that you're talking about here, yeah, you're talking about what, a dozen lots or 15 lots or whatever you're gonna sell that's gonna offset that. So, and, I mean, it's not even probably feasible to do that. So I'm kind of just thinking out loud here, but we're the developer, and typically when you're a developer, you have to bring it up to a standard where you have developable, saleable lots. And I mean, how you pass that on to the buyer of the lots is up to us as developers.
yeah, and as a developer, first of all, I mean, developers don't belong in the development business if they can't stomach problems like this coming up. There's all kinds of things going on in a process like this.
sure.
In a private development, you see this all the time. I'm just saying a private developer doesn't look at this and say, oh yeah, no problem, I'll pay for the generator, I'll pay for this, I mean, the private developers, you've been on both sides probably.
Because you pass it on.
They really scrap it out.
Right.
If they think they can pass it on, they will, but if it's.
Which we can too.
We may or may not, but I mean, if we don't have to pay that cost, the way a developer looks at it, a private developer, if he can make as much profit on these lots and not have to pay the cost on that generator, it's that much more money in his pocket. And I'm just saying, I'm being an advocate for us as the developer. We're always being hit up with these different expenses because I guess it's easy to come to us and do it. So I'm fine with this generator, I'm just.
Just to be clear, Commissioner Jordan, we treat this just like a private development, and and I think Tony would tell you, being involved with this, we're as aggressive as this because your fiduciary responsibility to the public flows to us, and we treat it like it's our money. And so when we're, like you say, scrapping these things out, we're looking for every penny every time we can get it and trying to find where we can, because we want as much money to flow to the public as you do. and we're on the front lines dealing with it, and making sure that it does. And I have no problem going back and showing you guys the comparison that we did that shows, here's one way to have it flow to the west, and here's the other way to split the two basins, and have you guys make those decisions. At the time, it was a pretty clear decision to me to do it that way. And then on the big picture, we do have all the financial data that we're tracking costs and budgets, and Commissioner Arman and the other finance committee members have seen that, because we made a pretty detailed presentation. We can bring that presentation forward here.
It would be nice to see. I mean, these numbers, I don't know any of them, and, yeah.
It was not my decision not to.
No,
bring
I
it in.
understand.
Yeah.
It's been part of my confusion.
You know, and sometimes I think you can get lost in the weeds when you try to go too deep in some of these things, but I can see that there's some frustration. And I think I mean, Tony, you may disagree, I don't know, but I think it's probably time that we kind of have that open discussion with everybody exactly where we're at, a public meeting. I mean, it's public information. And I think it would make it probably easier for some of the future decisions we're going to have to make based upon knowing where we're at right now.
Mr. English?
Well, just so that, kind of reframing, so I think what I'm hearing on a couple of things, well, one thing, we have one sewer treatment facility for the city of Coeur d'Alene, and this, this whole chunk, I mean, in terms of flowing to the west, eventually, yes, it'll all flow to the west, but it sounds like some time ago, there was kind of looked at it, and and maybe if we had heard about it earlier, we wouldn't have the issue, but we can't hear about everything. But what I'm hearing is that back a couple of years ago, there was a decision point that, if we break this flow up and some goes that direction and some goes that direction, it's all going to eventually go to the west. That what we're doing now, I don't think, if I'm hearing it right, it's not fair to characterize it as a add-on. Now, I'm all, I get the same heartburn if we have unexpected add-ons, but I don't think this is an add-on. I think this is a decision point affirming some process that was done a while ago that actually is going to save us, if I'm hearing right, save us a chunk of money versus if we had just said, do whatever it takes to make it all flow in one pipe. And and again, maybe it's timing, whatever, and this is a big project, but ultimately, we've got the responsibility on this board to make this stuff in a condition that we can sell and do all of that. And we are in a great market. Now, I also believe that, if the developer, there are costs that they'll add on if they have to. If they get a saving somewhere here or there, I'm not as convinced that we'll automatically see the savings. But as far as this decision, does it make sense to spend a little less than $50,000 to save that chunk of money? I think it does. I also think from everything we're hearing about everything going up, I got examples in my own household of stuff that it's like, if we can nail it down now and not pay $60,000 a month from now, it probably makes sense. So that's my 2 cents.
Sarah?
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. I've been trying to get a word in edgewise for the last 10 minutes.
You've been awfully quiet.
You've been so polite, I didn't even realize that.
I started to speak like 4 different times, so.
I didn't even hear you.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay, it's okay. I wanted to kind of make a little point first about the frustration issue that Commissioner Arman brought up. And Mr. Boyd, I want to tell you that you are not the target of this conversation in any way. The board deals with on a regular basis where we have a presentation, we agree to a project at a specific price under specific circumstances. And in my time on the board, I think maybe a quarter of those agreements come out as they were intended to come out in the beginning. And sometimes we feel like we're being we're a coin purse that people keep reaching their fingers into because we do have funds. And it's not that the projects aren't valid or that the asks aren't valid. It just feels like sometimes we're always being asked to write a check. And so I think there's frustration on that just from a general standpoint, not specific to this project, but general to Ignite as an entity. And I think yours gets kind of blown up because of the size of the project and the number of moving parts that you are dealing with in this project. So I wanted to put that out there because I know if I were in your shoes, I'd be feeling a little bit attacked right now. So I'm just, you don't have to respond to that. I just wanted you to be aware that this is a building frustration that's not necessarily related specifically to the Atlas project. The other piece that I wanted to say to my fellow board members was I want to be careful that we're not penny wise and pound foolish also. This is a very small dollar amount. This is a small ask. We know Phil is on our side, but if we feel like we're not getting enough information, it's incumbent upon us to have these conversations or be more prepared. We get this information before the board meeting about what's happening and why it's happening, and we're included in the emails. We get copies of the emails. I don't feel it's fair to put Phil on the spot in this kind of situation when we had all this information at hand. We can't talk about it beforehand, but if we have questions, I think we should be asking it in advance. I really think that that's the reason we get the materials before the meeting, is so that if we have questions, we can ask them so that the people who are coming are more prepared. Mm-hmm. And to have Phil go back and do what he suggested to do is going to cost us more money in fees from Welch Comer than it may save us in for the $50,000. So I am just going to be very bold and say, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the payment of up to $50,000 at this time for the lift station. Well, no, wait, the generator purchase is $33,000.
Correct.
I'm going to make a motion that we purchase the lift station generator for $33,000 as proposed to the board.
Well, there's more than that, though, because you're going to have the installation and the electrical costs, so there's additional costs on top of that.
But we can bring those
A
back.
number of 53,000 mentioned, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll be bold enough to second that.
I feel very similar to the way you do, Commissioner Jordan. I don't have the knowledge that you have about developers and non-developers and all that kind of stuff, but I also feel like, these are things that we can work on going forward. And, and maybe we know now, maybe I do, at least know some questions that I would want to ask in a future project so that I would be more aware of what's going on.
Well,
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes, ma'am.
I would suggest that you consider making the motion for the installation as well, because if we're going to purchase the generator, we're going to install it.
Okay.
So it seems like we should just include those costs.
And
rather
I had
than
narrowed
bringing
it down
back.
because Phil had specifically said he was just asking for the generator tonight, but
That's up to
I will amend my motion to include the installation and connections for the power and gas for the generator purchase as necessary, not to exceed $55,000.
Is the second okay with that?
Okay with the
Yes,
second?
yes.
Mr. Chairman, I support this motion, and I don't claim to be a genius developer. I've just been around the block and through the School of Hard Knocks a few times over the decades, but I just simply raise the question why we're paying for a generator for a regional lift station that serves a lot bigger area, and I think we got some good discussion out of it. I regret how long this took to go through this, but we covered a lot of ground on some other things too about this subdivision, so it probably might have been worthwhile with the discussion we had. I thought about putting some questions out in an email, but we're always being cautioned by our legal counsel about having effectively what amounts to a hearing on email back and forth, so I thought I'd just wait and discuss it here, and And I like Phil, I certainly didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
You're not.
with all the developers you work with, I mean, if this is the worst questioning you ever had by a developer, you've been pretty lucky.
And just to, while we're on that, I don't feel attacked at all. You guys have every right to ask me the question, and I think, again, I'm kind of relying on Tony, but we have spreadsheets and cost data and stuff to the nth degree, and everyone in my office is programmed to treat the public's money, because I think, as you guys know, we do 99% of our work is for public entities. I will also say, I can go back on virtually every Ignite project I've ever done, and we're not in the category that you are talking about. And we're going to show you a park budget here next month on a $6.5 million project that might be $4,000 or $5,000 over budget, which is pretty good on $6.5 million project that lasted 2 years. On an
What were those numbers? Can I?
No, you can't quote me on that. But I think we take a lot of pride in bringing projects in on budget, and I think, again, Tony knows how hard we work at that. But we can show you, Fort Grounds Drive, McEwen, all kinds of projects that we have done for you guys, and we take it very seriously.
I think you're doing good, and I.
Thank you. But you guys are not going to
I think you're
offend me.
doing great, I just,
Yep.
if you were sitting in your office with a private developer and said the city wants you to spend $50,000 for a lift station, the private developer would probably say, where's the city come off on that? Why? So I'm just asking.
Yep, and we would answer the question just like here, and I anticipated the developer would have said, that's good money to spend, because I'd rather avoid costs.
Danielle?
I was responding to Commissioner Jordan. You can certainly seek additional information. What you can't do is deliberate towards a decision as a group. So you can respond with questions, and Phil or Tony or I or whoever can respond to your questions. It's more, you can't have a discussion with each other that would be deliberating towards a decision.
On occasion, when someone's made a comment, and someone else has made a comment, then we get some caution in there not to make comments on emails, so.
Questions are better than comments.
Right. So
I
we have
send
to really
plenty of
watch
them.
that.
Chairman, I know you're waiting for a vote, just a
No,
final
I've got
comment on the, what I'm hearing, and I think struggled through this process, is kind of our scope and role as a board and as a developer, and what you were saying, who pays for what, what's kind of the standard practice versus what's unique about this, and in terms of where the costs come from, get passed on, how those relate to budget, because being a developer is new for most of us, right? So sort of that scope, but I see it like a Venn diagram, like there's Ignite board, Ignite developer, city, our buyers, and so I'm just understanding what's typical in terms of what to expect that the city would cover versus what our buyers should be prepared for, and what gets passed on, so that I feel like I can be a better fiduciary member, commissioner. I can fulfill my role a little bit better on behalf of the public.
I think we're kind of in the position of sitting on the board of directors of a development company putting in a subdivision. And this is our consulting attorney, and our corporation we're on the board of is the city of Coeur d'Alene, or the citizens of Coeur d'Alene. But we're in effect the developer.
Chairman Hoskins, I'll make one other comment, just a shout out to the city, sorry, because it just goes to what Commissioner Randall was talking about. The city has made accommodations for Ignite because you are a public entity with regards to things that would cost you money, having to do with bonding and permitting and other things. And, we anticipate that we've built these costs in thinking that they were there. Tony's had a discussion with the city administrator and say, some of this doesn't make sense. Why would we bond for this, which a private developer would bond for? And when you have to go bond for $4 million worth of infrastructure, most people don't have $4 million worth of cash. They go get an insurance policy and pay the premium on it for 2 years while you carry that cost. Those are costs you're avoiding, which we haven't tabulated that cost avoidance. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of the partnership, positive things that do flow from the city to you. And you also get a tremendous amount of, not that the city isn't always responsive, but to other private developers, but the city is really part of your team here. So Hillary Anderson and Troy and other parts of the city are just super great about working with us and very responsive.
They purchased the the whole site too.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to make certain, sorry, Chairman, I'll be quiet.
Commissioner Garcia's comments were very eloquent
Oh,
and
thank you.
and appreciated, and that's definitely not an attack. It's my biggest, my whole concern was when somebody goes to buy that house, whether it's a spec house or not, they're gonna pay that $700, and we're also paying for it. So, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So maybe this next topic will be more visual.
Well,
because-
we won't beat up Dell like we
Yeah,
did.
Dell's going to come up and make a presentation on that.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, real quick, could I ask a question while he's still up here? What do we think about another tour down there at some point? There's been a lot going on down there.
Well, that's probably gonna depend on how much it costs.
Pretty easy to drive around down there. I just drove around yesterday just to kind of get a feel, and it's,
I did the
there's
same,
roads and-
yeah.
Yeah, we can go do that.
Well, the-
Swing my
Yeah,
bike, yeah.
The builder probably doesn't want us driving around down there, do they?
That's a whole other discussion. The general contractor, LaRiviere, is the one that's still in control of the site, and the builders are, he's trying to keep them corralled because he has a bunch of infrastructure that's in
Yeah.
place that they don't respect as always as well as they should.
Sure.
Because they're builders and anyway. But yeah, anytime that you want to tour, we have construction meetings on Wednesday, and if you want to go after it, we can always do it then or anytime. Just even if you wanted to go out there and wander around with me, I'm glad to go do that.
Well, do we want to, we'll work through Tony to schedule something with you
Yeah,
then?
yeah, it would be good, because there's some other things that would be up in Phase 2B, this top part here. There's different options, and just based on the discussion today, having the board out there, the board of directors out there, and kind of explaining, gosh, there's one option like this, and there's this other option, and getting your input on it.
Yeah, we can go out there and tour it, but sometimes there's a value
Sure,
on occasion to do a tour with you, and then you can do that. You can say, okay, right here where that ridge is, that's where this street could run if we do option A, and if we do option B, it would go over here, and you can kind of point things
Yep.
out and answer questions.
yep.
Is Tommy still doing a lot of mining up there on Mount Hink? I mean, it seems like it's kind of come to a standstill.
It has, because there's a, I don't want to chase a rabbit too far here, but there's another option that is materializing where all of Mount Hink may go away up to a pit on Ramsey Road that ITD owns. I don't want to get too far down the road on it, but there's another option. And what it does is it would allow all of this to be developed. And so it would really drive the revenue up. So the private developer would be very happy because their revenue would go up. And of course, you guys, the revenue ends up in the public entity. That has a ton of moving parts, and it was something that Mayor Widmeyer had thought of a couple of years ago. And as we were working through some stuff on Mount Hink, it didn't work a couple of years ago. And I know I'm being vague about it, but I'm intentionally being vague because I don't have enough of the details right.
Yeah.
Some of it hasn't flowed up through the city like it needs to first. But the idea really seems to have merit. We had a meeting with ITD, and so there's some things coming together that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. And it could be a real positive thing for the project, because it would drive density, which drives revenue and all those things.
So where Mount Hink is, all that could turn into stable ground
Yeah.
that could be developed.
Yeah.
Okay, well, a private developer would think you were doing a great job.
But again, it's part of that partnership,
Sure.
and Mayor Widmeyer he kind of set the seed a couple of years ago, and just sometimes the stars, takes a while for them to line up, and they recently, I was driving along and I started thinking of something, I called the mayor, got a hold of ITD, we had some collaborative meetings that worked out well, and I think that the stars may line up. But I don't want to bring that forward until it's fully ripe and you guys actually have something to look at the economics of it, of which we're just starting on. And there's products that need to be put together, analytical work, things like that. And the mayor's bringing other partners to the table and whatnot, so.
Thanks, Phil, you're greatly appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. You guys are not, don't, it's no issue. So Dell's got to plug in his presentation here and we'll move on to that.
That would be good.
Quite a bonus.
That would put a real boost into the bottom dollar on the development.
And we can afford a generator.
Yeah, it'd pay for the-
Yeah, maybe we buy,
We'd
we could even
need
buy a
more
better
water and
generator
sewer, though.
maybe.
Yeah. We'll have to buy another lift station.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Which one of these advances, Phil?
Or you can just use
I
the
don't mind
mouse,
doing
yeah.
a lot of
Okay, thank you.
I hope we didn't make you nervous, Del.
Afternoon. Nice to see you all again. What did I do here? There we go. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the signage, how that design has progressed. We're going to focus today, hopefully, on some color selections and options for you folks to consider. Give you an update on where we're at with the final construction drawings and a little bit of an update on next week, meetings with, a couple meetings with the city and meeting with the contractor to look at constructability and cost. So I'm going to give you a real quick review of all the things we've talked about to date. The orange-brown colored circles here designate where our major signage is occurring, obviously at the main entrance off of Atlas at the roundabout, over here on Heartland, on Suzanne. And originally, we'd talked about street signs, but I think at the last meeting, we explained that the city said we had to still meet the AASHTO, so we eliminated the individual signs. These are some cutaways of some of the construction documents to show you where we're at and a couple of other considerations for you folks to look at. These aren't fully complete, they're just sort of snapshots in time from the construction drawings that we've been working on. And you'll notice that at the base here, on one half, there's the option that you folks have directed us to look at with the river rock to date. And I'm putting in another option for you folks to consider, which is more of what you call a ledge stone. So I have a couple of examples for that for you to look at. This would be a side view of that same main sign. This is the large entry gateway sign at the roundabout. Top view, I know this one looks a little bit complicated in terms of all of that structure that supports the sign. You're looking at footings, et cetera. And this is the smaller component that at Atlas is on the west side of the roundabout, but it's also repeated at Heartland on both sides of the entry at Heartland. So, any of you folks seen this sign as you enter Sandpoint, coming across the Long Bridge or as you're exiting off the byway? This is a Corten steel sign. It's been either laser or water jet cut to have the name of the city and their logo. And then it has a piece of colored Lexan behind it, and it's internally lit. So this is during the daytime, but at night has this bluish glow, and you see the silhouette. This is sort of the model of what we're looking at for our main sign and some of the smaller signs that only have the logo that hang in different locations. So what we've done here is they've generated, I think, maybe 5 or 6 different color options to discuss. This would be essentially that box panel that we just looked at in the Sandpoint one, with the lettering and the logo would have cutouts and then some sort of a colored Lexan behind it. This whole panel would be internally lit as well. You can see sort of a dark brownish finish on these main beams that carry the sign. There's some black accents here, and the two elements on either side that come forward in this elevation would also be black steel. Now we're looking right now at putting everything into a powder coat versus working with the true Corten steel. There's quite a bit of difference in cost in the Corten. There can be some issues unless it's fully pre-aged with staining and things with Corten. So we've found that you can get some very, very close finishes that look almost just like Corten. So that's where we're going on some of these. So this finish up here would be possibly referenced as sort of a darker Corten as the main sign panel itself.
one thing to look at, we're still,
Those would all be powder coated?
excuse me?
Those would all be, everything would be powder coated?
Yeah, so this would be.
We're not going to see rust or anything like that?
I'm sorry?
We're not going to see rust?
No.
Okay.
No, we wouldn't see any rust if we powder coat all of these elements. If you look closely at the wording here and the font that we've chosen, there is just a little bit on the W there and the A that you can see that we've modified a little bit from the original font. So it has just a little bit more of a curve to it. The logo has remained pretty much the same throughout, sort of suggesting the mill with that saw blade top and then this wave element that kind of moves through it for the waterfront. This is one of those samples that shows an option with the ledge stone. And the reason that I think it might be appropriate to consider it here is because of the horizontality of this sign, that the ledge stone along the base may be a more appropriate look. So we have standard concrete color for the columns here. This would be the ledge stone, and it's a faux stone. These bands at bottom and top would be a white. This element here is actually a metal band. This one is looked at as a masonry cap, and there would also be a masonry cap here. So again, we're working basically in the logo and the name in blue and Corten colors. This one very strongly a Corten, a little bit off of Corten here and here. So if appropriate, I'll move through them. We can come back and compare some of these. Now this one maintains the river rock, has much more of a stronger Corten feel to it because of the overall sign itself as Corten, the banding here that I mentioned, and even that masonry cap here and here would be colored out as a Corten color. The masonry caps obviously would be more of a stained concrete. In terms of a cap, they could probably even be integrally colored that way. The top element, the framework that supports and hangs the sign, has not changed from the previous one. And stop me at any time if you've got questions on any of them. Yes, sir.
Is the river rock cultured stone also?
Yes. Yeah. The cost of collecting the real river rock, putting it, mortaring it on, its depth primarily is why we would be looking at a cultured stone. Otherwise, all of these elements here where we have some slight offsets and things all start to expand quite a bit.
Are there some cultured stone, river stone that looks good?
There are. In fact, the river rock cultured stone is a very nice stone. One thing that if you look closely here, there are a couple of stones that we've added, and we've seen this in a patterning where they've mixed some stones that are a little bit flatter and a little bit larger with the river rock, and that's that look you're looking at here, so that it doesn't have such just a monoculture of the river rock. It gives it, we think, gives it a little bit more interest from a texture standpoint. So we'll call this one the Corten version. I think it's the largest Corten. Here we've essentially just reversed that. The beam itself would be finished in Corten. These areas are still Corten, but now the sign itself becomes a little bit more of a gray or brown Corten here. This one, I'm a little concerned about this one in terms of how visually well the name would read. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a little bit more contrast myself there.
Yeah, from our angle, we're having trouble seeing it.
Yeah, it's probably even difficult for you folks. Such as this, I think there's a little bit more contrast here. This one takes the logo and now starts to suggest a sky, water park, or waterfront trail with the green, the dark blue, and the light blue. So slight variation. Otherwise, this is essentially the first one you saw. So the real differences here become the logo. Mm-hmm. There's that one now. Only thing that changed was the logo itself. That's what we have so far. Can I back up on any of those, and how do I back up?
A, B, C, D, or E.
I'm not a design person, so I'm gonna leave that up to you guys.
I myself like the brighter logo.
Yeah, I
Number
think we
one?
need
Number one?
contrast so it stands
Well,
out better.
second to the last.
Second to the last. I like the ledgestone, though. I didn't initially, but the explanation made sense.
I've never been
Horizontal
a
look.
fan of River Rock personally.
So-
I don't know
Well,
why.
that's why I
just
said
never
I've
have.
never seen it where it really looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
I'm
the
not-
real River Rock, because it's so
Or name
thick,
values,
it's,
maybe.
I'm not either. It's kind of a personal choice, but I do like the River Rock where he worked the other stones in to give it some more texture, so it isn't just the same
In
old
this
round
version here?
stones all the time, yeah. Or
So-
monoculture, like you called it, yeah. That, it is, even though I'm not a fan of River Rock, I do like it a lot better the way you did it there, where you incorporated the other stones.
Yeah, the other thing we've noticed in selecting a faux River Rock stone is that we're looking for one that actually has that variation of color in it, where a lot of times the River Rock will appear almost all kind of whitish gray.
Yeah,
So this has a little bit of tan, which I think in this particular sign starts to accent the Corten colored elements.
Dale, what's the color choices of the other stone? Is it pretty broad?
Of the other stone, the
Yeah.
ledge stone, yeah, it is, it's pretty broad.
So if we wanted to go with something more like this color combination on the signage, you could find out, because it looks like you used gray on the stone before.
Yeah, on the, for instance, this one is more of a kind of a
Blue-gray.
monocolored charcoal, but you can get the ledge stone in multiple colors, and you can get it in that colored patterning. In fact, we've used that color patterning of ledge stone in signs before.
Are you concerned about the visibility of the writing or the lettering with the darker colors? I mean, from just this observation from here, it's really hard to see.
I think that if we look at the Sandpoint sign, it has a little bit darker blue Lexan, which I think probably is more appropriate.
Okay.
Because I think this is a little bit too light. So I think we'd need that contrast, and I think if it were a darker blue against that Corten color, I think it would be much easier to read. The black here that is picking up on some of these detail elements, I don't think that is the best representation personally of the logo.
I agree.
If I do think this is a nice representation of the logo.
Great.
I think it adds quite a bit of color when the remainder of the sign is, have such.
Just as an example, the light blue on that other logo, the one you just had there, stands out way better than the blue.
This one here?
It does,
in the
yeah.
lettering.
I agree.
Yeah.
The green seems kind of putting greeny.
Yeah,
does.
it's almost cartoonish.
Could be,
Because some of our standards for the buildings won't allow
Thought that was some
for
word I've
that,
never heard of.
right? That,
Shade.
like, we're going for more muted and accents, so it seems a little
Yeah.
incongruous with the actual buildings that will be inside. So I like the color, and I like something that is not so dark and dreary, but I wonder if a darker green or something that would make it feel less.
have you folks developed a color palette for the development?
That's you.
Or CC&Rs or thing, that we could maybe coordinate?
Phil, you
It's
have it,
not
don't
a-
you?
In the design standards?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we need those.
I agree.
Yeah. I agree.
Remember, we had a
Muted would be
discussion
good.
on those green doors at one point on the concept? No primary
Oh,
color.
no primary colors.
It's not a primary color.
Okay.
And
I
it
think
tells
you're-
like, I wish I knew that.
I think you got some good points about that green, and I share the others' concerns about the contrast of that sign, but I'm sitting here watching this, and that was one of my first concerns, is the contrast of the sign. But I don't know if this is fair to sit here looking at an angle at the projection there as to what it will really be like in person.
Well,
But as long as you understand the concerns, it needs to have enough contrast, people can read it
Yeah, I
from their
couldn't
car.
read it.
Well, the blue on the Sandpoint looked purple from here.
pardon me?
The blue on the backlit on the Sandpoint sign looked like purple from
It's,
my,
yes, it's probably closer to a blue-purple. Yeah, it's very bold, very dark.
It looks
good
pretty
standing.
purpley to me.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It looks very purple here. On this screen, it's a very dark blue. So
I don't remember. I'll have to pay more attention when I go through there next time.
Yeah,
I
this,
go up.
this sign is probably in the neighborhood of 5 feet high by 6 feet wide, so ours is substantially larger. A couple of elements related to that I'll share with you. Before I came here, I had a meeting with the city, and the person I wanted to talk to was not available. But I spoke with an assistant with regard to the sign ordinance. And for the most part, everything that we're showing you here is in compliance, but there seemed to be a question of interpretation as to whether we could have sign elements on both sides of the entry road, both at Celtice and at Heartland. I pointed out that Riverstone has monument signs on both sides, and this seems fairly similar to what that condition might be. So I won't have an answer on that until I actually get to meet in this coming week. Also, the other potential, is that the square footage of the sign panel that we're showing. Right here, this is about 76 plus square feet. Right now, the maximum within that ordinance is 60. There may be an opportunity for a variance. The square footage apparently has your frontage distance of the property apparently has some bearing on how much square footage that you can have for signage. As you know, we have a tremendous amount of frontage. So the question I want to propose to them is, based on that frontage, is there an opportunity to upsize it to this size? So there's still just a couple of things that I want to verify with the city before we take this to a final. If push comes to shove and they say absolutely not, it has to be 60, what we'll do is we'll take this design and we'll essentially scale it down. We won't just make the panel smaller. We'd have to proportionally make it all smaller. So before I move on to the last topic, I want to make sure I get you folks' feel for the sign that you like the best. And if there's two that you really are kind of leaning towards, I'd be happy to tweak or modify those two, forward them over for a final look.
I'm just going to speak up because no one else is, I see all these little smirks over here. I like the ledge rock. Is that what it's called, the ledge?
The ledge stone?
Ledge stone, yes, I like the ledge stone. And I liked the brighter logo personally. These are just my personal thoughts. I like the ledge stone, I like the brighter logo, and I like the signs not with the dark background that had more of the kind of rustish color, the kind of more of a brown color scheme.
Okay, so.
But I like the brightness of the logo. So I like the brown, kind of brown color scheme,
This
but I
one
like
here?
the other logo.
With these accent areas and maybe the colored logo in a darker blue?
And then the ledge stone instead of river stone.
In this color, ledge stone in that
Yeah,
color?
that it's kind of combining, to me, kind of the things that stand out to me as you've gone through this from a color and a structure standpoint. Those would be the elements I would, I personally would
I'd agree
like
with
to
you on
see.
that.
Oh,
I would agree
I
also.
concur.
I would agree
oh my
also.
goodness.
Green was the only issue.
However, I would mute the green or mute the
Yeah.
logo.
I like
We-
to work on the green.
We adjust the green and tone that one down a little bit, but stay with an option that shows a multicolored logo?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay?
So if
And
we
the
all
rusty
agree,
back-
Stone in the lighter color and the sign on the back.
Ledge stone in this color pattern
All of our discrepancy on
And-
Phil, and now,
Yes.
and scheme here.
We're easy
All are
going now.
contrary.
ledger stone, the ledger stone would be in the color palette of the river stone there, is that?
Right here.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay? I think I understand
Sarah.
all of that.
Nailed it.
Job, Commissioner.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our next move with Phil is to meet with contractor next week to look at constructability, cost, et cetera. And Phil, I know you're presenting some stuff at the next July meeting. Maybe we can bring some of that as well.
Then you'll know about the sign ordinance and all the ins and outs
Yeah,
by then.
I'll verify and share with Phil, who can distribute it, what the determination is of the ordinance.
Really great job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, thank you, Dale. Those
You're
are
talented.
some great
Thank you.
options, and we really appreciate the design and thought that's been put into these. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and I didn't develop the smaller components, like the Heartland signs or the one that will be on the west of this one. They will be in the same patterning.
Makes sense.
We're gonna have to beat him up a little bit, or Phil's gonna really feel bad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from the side table over there?
That concludes the executive director.
Next on the agenda is board commissioner comments.
I think we're ready for number 10.
And hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session.
Here, I'll take on my traditional role here, that I will, I make a motion that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061F to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Mendel,
Yes.
Whitmire,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Metz,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes?
Harmon,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Chapman.
Yes.
We are in executive session, and that's a wrap, Jeff.